guys doing? Um, well, as you can tell from the background here, I'm back at Melbourne. Um, it was quite a long trip. Well, aside from the 7 hour plane journey, I've spent about 3 weeks, yeah, around 3 weeks in Jakarta, just basically meeting my old friends and as well as spending my Chinese New Year celebration with my parents and my family members. Um, well, I mean, there were really pros and cons to having a long trip, and and spending a lot of time just really overseas. Um, I feel like there were some there were some times when I wasn't really able to feed my brain, so to speak, like to really intellectually feed myself as I can do as freely here in Melbourne, with the amount of resources and the books available here and the people whom I can communicate with. I think, yeah, it's better in Melbourne. So, the topic that I'm willing to address for tonight is rather controversial. I'm not basing it from any books or references because it has been something which I've contemplated for a while, right? And it was also present within my theology course throughout my studies. But I decided to formulate the topic um, based from what I've learned so far and from what I can observe after studying a bit of political science. So, the topic that I wish to discuss is based from the question on whether calling women beautiful means supporting the patriarchy. I think this question itself it provides really broad answers, and it can come from various different approaches. It can be religious, philosophical, even um, existential, and political. But since I have been um, discussing um, in recent times more on contemporary philosophy, I will be approaching this from um, a contemporary vision. So, if you guys are familiar with Simone de Beauvoir, a French philosopher, um, she mentioned that patriarchy is an instrument of oppression. For Beauvoir, humanity is a male, and male defines woman not in herself but as relative to him. Man can think of himself without women. She cannot think of herself without men. So, again, in other words, patriarchy, from what she understands, um, means the idea that women are only viewed as worthy, beautiful or worth or valuable, if they are approved under the male gaze. For example, let's just say I've had this experience, where I was creating an art poster that I was supposed to promote like a product, like a soap, a body soap. And back when I was probably like 14 or 15 at the time, and I wasn't familiar with the subject of sociology at all, nor I had any interest. Um, I was told that my drawing was sexist because I drew and I painted a woman with very flowy, long hair. I tried to make her as beautiful as I could, with some flowers popping out of nowhere, just all around her, in attempt to seduce a male who is gazing from the distance from a window, of a house from a second story. So, what I was trying to capture in that illustration was to have the product, was to have the product used by the female in order to capture the attention of a potential partner, potential male, miles away. You know, beauty is measured by the kind of soap that she used, perhaps in that context. But really, in general, this is it's that's one perspective. It can be viewed as patriarchy. But on the other hand, calling women beautiful, or relating, coming back to that discussion about the poster, it can be a symbol of female empowerment in a way. But it's contradictory because the idea of female empowerment is to bring about confidence within oneself, from oneself, isn't it? But it needed the approval of the male, which made it patriarchal. And the Bible, as what Beauvoir said earlier, when she mentioned that humanity is a male, it's the opposite of what was mentioned in the Bible, because the Bible denoted that, well, if you were to take Genesis, if I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm right, but I believe it was Genesis chapter 2, verse 28 or 27, where where the narrator mentioned God creating humankind, and he created them both male and female. Now, of course, there are multiple interpretations of this. It could be written by a different author, in a different era compared to what was mentioned later on, that God created women out of the male rib, right? So, yeah, I think that it really depends, because women throughout history has been subject to this view, to this women had been propagandized throughout history that they were functioned as simply, a servant to the male. They had to be approved by the male, and they cannot go, like countries in, was it in Arabia, where the women had to ask the husband for approval when driving, I think. Yeah. Anyway, Simone de Beauvoir mentioned as well that the idea of femininity, is sort of a social construct as well. Simone de Beauvoir mentioned as well that women only become women because of the circumstances of their society. And what she really meant by this is that although one is born biologically a woman, she becomes a member of the female gender through upbringing and socialization into her culture, which assigns specific meanings and sometimes privileges of womanhood. This is according to an interpretation of someone by Incora. So, anyway, going back to the subject itself, whether calling women beautiful is patriarchy, is supportive of the patriarchy. Um, I disagree with that wholly because there are, I'm not sure if actually there it's plural, but I know that there is one society in somewhere in China where it's governed by a matriarchal ruler, right? Everybody dressed feminine, but they were strong. They're strong people, even if they're female, and females are to be said, according to general people, that they're weaker than the other sex. Um, I think this was actually mentioned by a friend of mine. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was from the book, The History of the Sexes or something. So, beauty is really, to me, in the eye of the beholder. It's very relative because some people view a more femininized, I'm not sure if that's a right word for it, a feminized version of beauty as the superior one. Well, some people concluded that a more masculine type of beauty, sort of more agile, more um, dexterous, I suppose, would be more beautiful. But it's really hard to explain because everybody contains an element of femininity and masculinity. And I believe that there is a certain element of of continuum within the person. Even though one could be more, um, was it, without offending anyone, even though, like, let's just take me as an example, like I could be a bit more masculine in most days, while in some days I could be more feminine. And that's not because I change my gender all the time, but simply because of the circumstances which allowed me to be so, If, for example, I'm the only family member in the house, um, but for example, let's say that I have younger sisters or brothers who aren't really able to take care of themselves, then I would take on the role of the masculine and do the sorts of things that probably, be a bit provident, like driving them to school, getting the groceries to cook at home. Um, I think that just because I don't think that these activities should be really defined by which gender is which. I mean, there's certainly already specific activities which females do, or females tend to do, or tend to be interested in, like makeup, like for example, journaling perhaps, or reading is a more feminine trait, a feminine hobby, while the male hobby is, for example, collecting figurines, figurines of um, Zeppelin airships, let's just say, or the warships, or was it the war jets, let's just say. So it really depends. Um, so anyway, that's all for tonight. I don't want this to be a really long video, but the reason why I created this video is just so that I want to get you guys engaged in a conversation and a discussion, what you guys would think if you were um, in the position of being asked this question. And in America especially, there's a huge crisis among the left with identity, right? And it has been really a challenge for not just them but also us to really to really discover our identity through this world of ongoing multiculturalism, the syncretism of cultures, and different interpretations of what it means to be female or male or or others. Um, so yeah, before I post my next video, I hope that you'll be able to um, leave a like, provide comments, and share this video if it interests you. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace out.